Hello everyone and welcome back to Nagash channel dedicated to Sigmar, and in this video we'll be talking about why play Fyreslayers. So they are of course the angry fiery dwarves that we have in Age of Sigmar. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to firstly quickly mention about who they are in the lore. We're going to have a look at strengths and weaknesses in this army. So the idea is maybe you're thinking about starting this army. Maybe you already have this army and you just want a bit more motivation to paint you guys up. Or, like I say, if you are more of the former and you're thinking about doing this army, hopefully by the end of it you'll realise it is an army you actually want to do. Or it's an army you've decided maybe you would rather leave and do something else instead. Hopefully by the end of this video you will just have a bit more clarity to help you make that decision. And I want to start with their lore, because the first thing I want to say about these Fyreslayers is if you're coming from Warhammer Fantasy and you remember the Slayers that we had there, we had Troll Slayers, Demon Slayers, Dragon Slayers. I'm not a massive expert, but there were a few different types of Slayers we had there. These Fyreslayers are not the same. They are really a new race that has been born in Age of Sigmar. Of course there are similarities, but they truly are an Age of Sigmar army. And something that I feel is important to say quite early on is that their god Grimnir, apologies again if I'm getting these words and names wrong, but he had a battle against the mother of salamanders, Volcatrix, and this was a colossal battle where, you know, Grimnir, who is obviously he is a character from the world that was, but he is now a god in Age of Sigmar, fought this horrendously huge god beast size of a creature, being Volcatrix. Like, the size of its fingers were the size of dragons. You know, this thing is enormous. And during this big climactic battle, and also known as Grimnir's last battle, they essentially exploded. And the Fyreslayers believe that Grimnir, when he shattered, the essence of his body became what is known today, or how the Fyreslayers call it, Urgold. So this is really what brings the Fyreslayers to where they are. They are searching for this Urgold to be able to try and bring back their god. This is why when we see the Fyreslayers, they're often, you know, the naked little dwarves, but they have all these ruins that are actually hammered into them. They're not tattoos, they're actually Urgold that has been made into ruins and then hammered into the Fyreslayers, which then gives them their so potent strength as they can get power from this gold. Is this gold, this Urgold, is it actually something that is 100% definitely their god? I don't know, but it's what they believe, and to be honest they're probably right. So where can they get this gold, as it is scattered throughout the realms? So obviously they can find it themselves, but they will also, this is what makes them very interesting, particularly for an Order army. They will fight for anyone who will give them Urgold in return. And this could be the forces of chaos, it could be death, it could be destruction. Obviously it's more likely going to be other Order armies. You know, the Fyreslayers don't want to team up for chaos just because they're going to give us the payment that we want. And we don't really care if we help chaos out. They would prefer to not help out chaos, but you know, beggars can't always be choosers, and that is really what they are after. And then that's why you often can see them as mercenaries, anything like that, and it makes them quite a unique dwarf army, and particularly an Order army with that. And they also have an interesting feel. Bear in mind they're mainly about melee and combat compared to the traditional dwarves. They'll sit back and shoot. And I know you had, like, you know, combat offensive units and dwarf armies, but you know, this is practically purely combat focused. You can have some shooting, but it's not the predominant factor in the army. Okay, so I want to end the lore segment of this video there, just because at the time of this recording I'm not hugely knowledgeable about the Fyreslayers myself personally. I haven't really had too much interaction with their lore, but this is something that obviously when I do a Fyreslayers army series, like a big long one, I will research their lore very thoroughly. So hopefully you guys can wait until then, or when I do a dedicated lore video for Fyreslayers. And if I've said anything that is incorrect, I do apologise, and if you can just all enlighten us down below, that would be great. But like I say, these videos are a little bit of lore and strengths weaknesses. So with that, I actually want to go on to the strengths of the army. And it is at this point that I imagine that I was going to call them half naked, but practically all naked, apart from their beard, almost a bit of loincloth, dwarves are a thing you're into. I don't judge. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. So already I'm going to say that is a strength for you. And joking aside, with that, they've got a very unique aesthetic. As much as I said that they are unique as their combat focus, they're also unique as in, yes, they're like aesthetically look like the Slayers from the World Wars, but they are like those Slayers, but you know, like on steroids and you know, pumped up in Age of Sigmar, as a lot of the armies are. So they have a very interesting aesthetic, and being a new army, all plastic kits. So there's no resin, there's no metal to worry about, and the plastic kits they're not the newest ones in Age of Sigmar, I'm not going to lie to you, but they are certainly newer than Warhammer Fantasy kits, particularly for the dwarves. I know you're counting overlords, but anyway, so you have that. They also have some very cool looking models. In particular, when I'm talking about this, I am referring to the Magma Droff, which I think is a great model. I'm trying to think of ways how I can put it in my own army, as I don't play Fyreslayers. I'm thinking of ways of how can I put this in my Chaos army, or how can I make it look zombified or skeletal in my Death army. You know, I really want that model, and I'm trying to put away in the army. I was thinking about maybe using it as the mount for my War Shrine for my Chaos army, but I'm going to go down a different route. But anyway, it's a lovely model, and what's even good about it now is that you can get it in a Start Collecting box. The Fyreslayers have a great entry point there, that Start Collecting box, which is it hasn't just came out, but it's fairly new. I think it came out when their latest Battletome did, and the beauty with that box is, before the Start Collecting box, it was a very expensive army to get into. In complete honesty, it wasn't as hard to justify doing it, but you would have to be very committed to know that as the army that you would want to do, as you would have to buy several boxes of expensive guides to be able to do it, particularly how the army can play as practically a horde army to a certain extent. The other good thing about that Start Collecting box is you are also going to get, I think you can make like 3 heroes out of it, 1 on the Magma Droff and then 2 separately on foot, because it's such a good kit. And then you're also going to get 10 Volkite Berserkers. The interesting thing about this Start Collector box when it came out is it was actually priced the same, or I think actually £5 cheaper here in the UK than to buy a Magma Droff by itself. So it was buy the Start Collector box, get all the extra stuff in it, and you're saving £5 compared to the Magma Droff. I think it was like that for a week until they changed the prices over and actually brought the price of the Magma Droff down from, I think it was 65 to £60. And that is the one and only time that I've seen Games Workshop lower the price of a single model, but they didn't shout about it and they didn't even announce it. It was just one day 65, Start Collecting box, now down 60, which is really, really cool. It's a very rarity Games Workshop lowers their prices in these price adjustments. So yeah, it's a great Start Collecting box is what I'm trying to tell you, to get into an army that would otherwise be quite expensive. And with that, I now want to move on to strengths sort of more on the tabletop, but like during the game. So Fyreslayers, they are one of the most defensive armies in the game. Are they the most defensive army? I'm not too sure about that, but they certainly are definitely in the running to be. They have, bear in mind these are naked dwarves, they have insane amount of saves stacked upon them to be able to shrug off damage. Now I know in the new General's Handbook 2020 that you can only use like one ward save ability, one death save ability, you can't stack them, but the Fyreslayers are still very strong at that. The Fyreslayers, as well as being very defensive, they can actually be surprisingly offensive, which is something that I found out when I faced them in a tournament end of last year, I think it was October, November time last year, so actually to be fair, about a year ago. But I found out what Hearthguard Berserkers were, and I realised that they do many very nasty things. As I found out as a Flesh Eater Court player, I charged Terrorgeist into them. My Terrorgeist did insane amount of mortal wounds to them. I think, how many was it? With all his extra attacks and everything, with the more, I think he ended up, and I was really lucky, he did 20 plus mortal wounds, I think more like 30 to these Hearthguard Berserkers, and only 1 or 2 of them died because of how much damage they shrugged off. And then the Hearthguard Berserkers just decimated my Terrorgeist and my unit of 12 Flayers. Like, do not be caught off guard by thinking that these guys are very defensive. They can't be offensive as well. They certainly can. Of course, they need buff stacks on them and everything else to make them like that. And I know, like I said, the change in ward saves may have affected their defense capability somewhat. I haven't played against them, surprisingly, with how the world is at the moment. But I think they are still probably pretty defensive still at that. And the other thing I want to say sort of with them on the tabletop is because they're dwarves, they don't have magic. But it's one of those things where we don't believe in magic, but prayers, of course that's a thing. Why wouldn't it be? So you get 3 prayers in this army. So when I say 3 prayers, I mean you get more than that, but you get 3 of the endless prayers. Apologies if I can't remember what they're called. Are they magma invocations of magma invocations? Something like that anyway. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but I think that's what they're called. They're something along those lines. And the great thing about those is that the enemy can't unbind them. It does mean that there are ways for them to disappear off the board. Something like at the end of every turn or battle round, roll a dice to see if it stays there. But it means that the enemy can't get rid of them unless they have a very specific ability that allows them to do so. You can't just unbind them like that. Also means when you've got your normal prayers, so even without the models. And I want to say some of the models are very cool for that. Like you have this massive, magma creature breaking out of the ground as one of the prayers. Looks very cool. But with those models aside, you do also have your standard prayers, which again can't be unbound. You're not always guaranteed to get them off, but it's just one less thing to worry about, which I think is cool. Your bravery is actually a thing in the army that is surprisingly not game-changingly amazing, but something that's surprisingly good for an army that's not, death or demons. I think your standard bravery is along the lines of 7 for your troops, so that's not too bad there. And the other thing I want to say as well for the army is, like I say, it's very defensive and it's very, it can be very combat focused. But you can also, there are some shooting in it. It's not the predominant part of the army, and not from what I've seen. But by no means does that mean that you can't try and make it so, which I think could be interesting to see. And with the lodges you also have in your army as well, which are like the sub-allegiances, there's different ways to play the army. There's lots of flavour and stuff to use a army that, and I want to use this opportunity to go into the sort of negatives of the army. Is what I'm going to say is, for an army that doesn't have a lot of model options, you don't have loads of unit choice, the sub-allegiances give you a way to sort of maximize each of those unit choices, or at least a good chunk of them. But like I say, then slide into the negatives, because like I said, we are honest on these on this channel and in this video as well, the cons. And the first one I want to start with, despite the army being nice new kits and everything and all plastic, you don't have much variation. If you were to look at, I don't know, I'm going to use some of the big names here. So, like a Stormcast army where you have an enormous range, or a I don't know, Legions of the Nagash army, where I know everything in that range is not the most competitive, but you have a large range to choose from. Or if you go for something like the Gloomspite Gits, where you have lots of choice. This is an army more comparable to Iron Jaws, in the sense of how much unit variety you have. Now, this doesn't mean that it'll always be the way it is. Who knows? In 3rd edition, when the Fyreslayers get another new book, they may receive more models. In all honesty, I think in 3rd edition, for all the armies that are lacking unit choices, I think when they get their Battle Tomes 3rd edition, that is when they will get new models. That's when they get replacement models. Fingers crossed for Seraphon. So, like I say, at the moment, that's a bit of a problem. If you want a large amount of variety of, essentially just models in your army. The other thing I want to say that could be linked to this is, although half-naked dwarves, particularly red dwarfs, can be cool, You may get fed up painting, you know, I don't know, 50 plus guys that all look the same. You know, it may get a bit tiresome, especially with the amount of flesh. What I would say though is to turn that on its head a little bit. Is don't feel afraid to paint the dwarves different skin tones. You know, like, unless you have lore behind this is where they're from. I don't know, the Realm of Shadow, so you know they've all got darker skin tones. Or they come from, I don't know, Shaiish, and that makes all their skin pale. Whatever your lore is. But what I would say is don't be afraid in painting and mixing up the skin tones. You know, it just adds a bit more diversity into your painting palette. Really, at the end of the day, I know I would have to do that just to break it up and just to keep it a bit more interesting. But if you really like a certain scheme you're going for, absolutely crack on with it. But it's just in case you find it a bit tiresome once you get, I don't know, 40 models in or something. There's no, you know, you could use it a way to differentiate the squads and stuff, just so you can keep your sort of easy to remember while you're playing the game, so you can think about other stuff. So yeah, and sort of staying with the off the table side of things in terms of negatives, it is a expensive army. I know I said that the start collecting box is fantastic value, which it is, and to be honest, you could probably slowly build up a small army by just repeatedly buying that box. However, what you're going to want to do, because what most people do, particularly if you're looking from a competitive point of view, is you're going to want some Hearthguard Berserkers, which I said and mentioned earlier are the ones that wiped out my Flesh Eater Court army whilst not dying at the same time. They are, as I can see, the most regarded and highly regarded unit in the army in terms of, you know, damage output. So that's why you're going to want to tend to lean that way, and they're not in the start collecting box. And if you're going to buy them straight from GW right now, times this recording, it's going to cost you £27.50 for 5 of them. And people like to take them in like units of, I think, 15 plus. So you can see where this starts to get expensive if you want to chase the meta. Obviously things change, and who knows, by the time you're watching this, it may be the Volkite Berserkers who you actually get from the start collecting box, which are actually the ones that are the ones you want in the army list you're going for. You don't want the other Berserkers, you want these ones. Who knows? But at the moment, you'll be wanting to buy the separate boxes of the Hearthguard Berserkers to, like I say, make your army as competitive as possible. Is that the way you have to play your army? Absolutely not. I know people who really like the idea of going as many magma drafts as you can, and I know people who have said that's not a good idea at all because they are not worth the points for this, that, and this reason, and you should be putting in, like I said, those Berserkers in instead. Do what you want to do at the end of the day. If it was me, I'd go as many Mamdrill as possible, as I think it's the coolest model in the in the range, to be honest. In an army that I said, well, the models do kind of look the same. And when I mean kind of, I mean, I think out of most of the army ranges in Age of Sigmar, Fyreslayers are up there for being the army that kind of looks quite 100% the same and hard to tell apart. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I've been in Games Workshop website to try and differentiate what is the Volkite Berserkers and what are Hearthguard and like Uruk Berserkers, maybe they call that. The heroes wouldn't have a clue, so without reading into them. But that might not be a problem for you. You might be okay with it. But thank God I'm going to say they have a magma drop, otherwise it would just be all the same. Anyway, so moving on to what I want to keep on talking about, the negatives. Moving on to the table, they are an army, like I said, that relies on a lot of buffs and a lot of bonuses from heroes, etc. So that means that your heroes are incredibly important in this army. You're probably going to want to always take your 6th hero to the limit in a 2,000 point game. So the issue here is, although it's good having these powerful heroes, but the enemy are going to snipe them off as soon as possible. Of course, it depends what army you're fighting against. If you fight against, you know, if you were to play against myself, I have very few shooty things in my collection for Age of Sigmar. I have one catapult from the Bone Reapers that still to be painted, like, and I've never really used. So like that, and out of my like collection of, I don't know, like 15,000 points of death, that's what I have. So there's not really too much of a problem from it, but it's just something you need to bear in mind. Probably these days, I mean, I do think shooting is getting more powerful, so something you have to bear in mind. But also magic is a big one. Play against each army, for an example, they have a lot of offensive output of their spells. The same with some death armies as well. So it's something you're going to want to look out for, and it is one of your weaknesses you have to be aware of in the army. And what I want to also add on to the end of that is that although you don't actually have any, like magic in your army, like we said, you have prayers instead. You do have ways to stop enemy magic. You haven't got bountifuls or ways to do it, but you do have ways to unbind and ways to ignore some magic. And you can always, ally in, I don't know, a Stormcast Knight Incantor, for example, as a wizard to help you unbind those enemy spells depending on how you're building your Fyreslayer army. And I think really that's all the sort of negatives I can come up with for the Fyreslayers from myself, from what I've seen. Obviously, if you've got any other negatives or any other positives, myself and I'm sure other people will be happy to hear them down below in the comments, because like I say, this isn't an army I play, and by the end of the video it will probably be, because we're coming towards the end, it will be a shorter why play than some of my others, just because it's not an army I am massively knowledge on, but I wanted to share what knowledge I had with you guys. Okay, so sort of, like I say, coming towards the end now, doing a summary. Why play Fyreslayers in Age of Sigmar? Play the army if, firstly, you love dwarves, particularly if you love the Slayers from the old world as well. They're not the same, but if you love that aesthetic, this army is truly for you. If you're a big fan of those half-naked, red-bearded dwarves, to be honest, you're probably sold enough on this army as you will have plenty of them in your army. The army is competitive. It is very much huge on the defense without having to paint up too much armor really in the army at all, more like loincloths. And it can be a very offensive outputting army with that. And it's very, like I said, hero focused. Not that hero focused you've got an Archaon or a Nagash, that's, a powerhouse, but you're going to want to take your 6 heroes. If you love all the heroes, it's good for that. And it's an army that I say is very strong on not magic but prayers, because it can't be unbounded unless, like I said, there's a specific way the enemy can do that, which is very rare. And they have an awesome start collecting box to get you started with that army. And like I say, just to bear in mind for you guys as the cons, it can be expensive when you go beyond the start collecting box, depending on how you want to build your army, of course. You don't have to chase the meta, and the meta is always changing. It's also an army that can all kind of look the same. So I'll be honest, if you're not really a fan at all of the half-naked dwarf aesthetic, like any of the standard infantry units, you only have 3 to choose from, so any of those units, if you're not really a fan of that, don't do the army. Even if you're like, I quite like it, but don't do the army, do something else. But if you, like I say, if you do like that army, it is really going to be one for yourself to do. And yeah, I think that's about it. So guys, like I say, apologies if it feels like this video is a little bit shorter than the other why play videos I've done, but purely that's because I wanted to tell you guys my views on this army rather than me just talking for, I don't know, another 20 minutes and me just talking about a load of crap. I wanted to give it in a more concise way. Of course, like I say, I'll plan to do, with like every army in Age of Sigmar, a full long playlist of Fyreslayers, and when I get to that point, I will have a lot more knowledge about the army for you. Hopefully, depending when that video series comes out, I may have even played against a few of them, as I have a local friend who is going to be building up his Fyreslayer army, so it would be cool to actually get some playtime and that experience in with you, and also ask them for their thoughts of how they think the army performs. So guys, that is the end of the video. I'm going to thank you very much for watching this. If you did enjoy the video, please smash that like button, as that massively helps. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well, and if you have, hit the notification button as well, the little bell, to just make sure that you guys will never miss one of my videos. It massively helps the channel, and it's absolutely free for you guys to do so. What I would also like to say in this opportunity is a massive shout out to my patrons. You'll be able to see them on the screen now. These guys allow me to do this channel. If it wasn't for them, the channel wouldn't be able to continue. So a massive shout out to them. If you'd like to support on Patreon, you are welcome to click on the link in the description down below. Even if you just check it out, guys, I'll be massively appreciative. And anything from $1 a month really helps, like I say, keep the channel going. So thank you very much if you look at that. But anyway, guys, until next time, Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and of course remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.